We drove to Birmingham. I had all the equipment in my car, but I'd forgotten one important thing, and that is the coffee. I'd completely forgotten the coffee. My colleague was like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And I was like, we're here. We might as well see if we can't sell this. An hour later, we're in the car park having clinched the deal with no coffee. And he said to me, I don't know whether to be seriously impressed or horrified. Hi, welcome to Slideshow. My name is Dave Hayward. I'm the founder of Europa Creative Partners. This is a special edition of Slideshow. It's my first ever solo episode. I'm going to be taking you through a presentation I gave a few days ago at the Revved Write Offs event, which is a Pecha Kucha event where you talk about things that haven't gone so well. This is one where we talk through some of the biggest disasters and hiccups that happen along the way. So this is my contribution. It's about jumping off the deep end, 4 lessons from jumping. So I'm not going to muck around. I'm going to get into it. Not going to be the longest episode in the world because this is a Pecha Kucha format. So it's 20 slides. And I think you're allowed to linger for a minute or 2 minutes. I didn't follow the rules exactly, but we'll get into it, see what happens. So everyone, when they are talking about sinking or swimming, just jump in. That's the advice. They're almost always talking about swimming. They very rarely talk about sinking. My career's been awesome. I'm so blessed, but it hasn't happened without some unbelievably abrupt change and stuff blowing up in my face. It's a career that's notable with some extreme industry and discipline changes. It's been a lot of things, but it's never been boring. One thing that I always say to my wife before I take on any gig, any project, any task really is, I can't do this. I'm not someone that's filled with loads of self-confidence. I'm not someone that naturally believes that I've got the goods, but it hasn't really stopped me doing anything. I guess when your fear and self-doubt is turned up to 11, it actually makes a lot of decisions easy because everything feels the same. But I'm not alone, and you're not alone if you feel this way. I sat through an amazing talk by a guy called Dante St. James, who's a fantastic speaker and entrepreneur from top of Australia, Northern Territories. And he referenced a study by Kinjobi where they found that 84% of entrepreneurs experience some kind of imposter syndrome. I think the 84% is everything up to and including moderate amounts of imposter syndrome all the way up to extreme amounts. And 86% of them, even the ones that are really successful, still feel like frauds. But I have an operating thesis in putting this talk together. It made me reflect on how things have been through my career. And one of the things that made me realize is that each jump really did make me in some shape or form. But it did cost me in terms of what you might call the compounding interest. I sometimes look at people who've had linear careers where they've stuck at one discipline or one industry and they've honed their craft, they get better and better, get this real depth to the way that they operate. I'm not sure that I ever got that because I changed. What I think it does give you is breadth, real breadth. What it doesn't always give you is depth. One of the things that I feel about the way that I've gone about things is that I think one of the big lessons I've learnt over time is that optimism needs to be a tactic, not a default setting. There's a kind of school of thought of just saying yes to everything, and if you have unlimited resources and unlimited time, that's probably okay. There is a part where you just have to just do it. I'm not doubting that. But going in blindly hopeful that something's going to work without actually thinking through how you're going to do it is probably not wise. An example of that was when I was about 22, I was working at a coffee roastery and there were 2 owners. They had a catastrophic falling out one day. They were best mates and they fell out over, it felt like one day, but maybe it was over a couple of weeks. One of the guys left and he owned a welding business. And then he got in touch with me and basically said, here's the thing. When I was your age, an entrepreneur took me on and he gave me the keys to his business, essentially, showed me the ropes really fast and left me to it. And everything was fine and I learned heaps. That's what he said. Everything wasn't fine. I walked into a business where there was people had been there 10 to 20 years. There was no context given to any of them about what I was there to do or what I was expecting to be doing for them. But I walked in smiling, and they were very suspicious of me, especially the first 6 months. And they had every right to be suspicious because their suspicion was that I did not know what I was doing. And they were correct. I did not know what I was doing. But after 2 years, we left as mates, and I really had got to grips with that job and got very good at it. I may have taken the wrong lesson away from that learning. I don't know where this really fits in my talk, but I thought I'd put it in because it was around the time just after I left for the UK. I got a fantastic job working the sales manager of the UK's largest coffee distributor, and at a coffee tasting in Birmingham, I drove up with a colleague who came up from Bristol. We drove to Birmingham. I had all of the equipment in my car, but I'd forgotten one important thing, and that is the coffee. I'd completely forgotten the coffee, and so we went in there, and my colleague was like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And I was like, we're here. We might as well see if we can't sell this. So I walked in and we did the deal. An hour later, we were in the car park having clinched the deal with no coffee. And he said to me, "I don't know whether to be seriously impressed or horrified." Another part of the lesson that I've learned along the way from jumping in the deep end is that bosses can be terrible at their job and they can cost you yours. That's a kind of particular type of boss. I had a boss once who, during performance review feedback, said to me, her main point of feedback was that I was too trusting and that I shouldn't trust my colleagues' intentions. And I was like, the fuck? Really? I was completely baffled by that, still a bit baffled by it, but I think it says a lot more about her and the business we're working in than anyone else. Another thing that I experienced from bad bosses was when I was in sales, I was asked to, at the start of the financial year before a board meeting, to give what I thought was a stretch target for me. I think it was just me at the time. I didn't have a sales team. And I thought that an absolute stretch target for us would be 350K. I thought that's what we could do in a financial year, but it was an absolute stretch target. And the CEO and the CFO basically came back to me and said, well, to make our numbers work, it needs to be double that. It needs to be 700K. And I was like, that's fine. Are you going to give me any more resources? And they were like, no, we're not going to give you any more resources. We're just going to back you morally. And so that's what they did. They talked me round for a few days, and I caved. I shouldn't have caved, but I did. And then they went to the board meeting, and then they came back out of the meeting and said to me, "Oh, we put your target up to $1 million, and good luck. We back you." And of course, what happened is by the end of the financial year, when I think we landed around 360K, so not far off the original stretch target that we got. They did everything they could to pin the miss on me. So I was cooked from the minute that I agreed to the 700K, let alone the $1 million that they just put in their Excel spreadsheet. Another thing, another lesson that I've learned from my time jumping in and out of different roles is that at a certain point, suddenly all the stars align and you think maybe all this crazy experience I've got might have accumulated and I might actually be in the job that I was actually fated to take on. In this case, I had worked for years doing all sorts of things. I've worked on 3 World Cups. I've done a lot of sporting activations and stuff like that, working for brands like AIG, Nike, all those sorts of things, agency side. I only bring that up because what happened was pretty much through a series of events, I ended up being appointed the chief marketing officer of a sporting brand. It was my dream job. I had a little bit of profile built because of it. It was a big step up for me, but I really felt like I'd bloody made it. And more importantly, I felt like I'd come home. I felt I'd found a job that I could do because I had done lots of jobs like it, lots of things around it. For the first 12 months, it was fantastic. I did loads of great stuff, but then it all came apart. There were some financial irregularities that I'm not going to go into here, mostly because I don't really know what happened. But basically some financial scandal predating all of the people that worked there came up and all hell broke loose, basically. And then from then on in, the environment was far from optimal. and I started getting seriously depressed. In actual fact, what I found was that I just needed to quit. There were all sorts of things I could have done, but ultimately I chose to quit, and it was the one thing that in my career I'd really feared, which is leaving a job without another job. It was in the middle of a major recession here in New Zealand, which we're still climbing our way out of, seemingly. But at the time, there were definitely no jobs around. And it's the one thing that I really dreaded. I thought my career was over. I thought financially it was over. I just bought a house, and I really did think that I'd made a series of bad choices, and also that the events had conspired against me. But actually, on the day that I was truly free, unfortunately, I'd never got gardening leave or anything like that. The bastards made me work out every minute of the notice. The day I was truly free, I had no money, I had no job, and I had a freshly minted mortgage for a new house. But I felt amazing, and I knew that the thing that I needed to do was revive the agency which I'd owned, Europa Creative Partners. I owned it for 10 years. Most of the time it was a side hustle, but I knew that this was my time to do it, mostly because I had no choice. There were no jobs around, so this was really what I needed to do. I did it, and it's been one of the best things I've ever done in my life, and I wish I'd done it years ago, really, but there you go. So really, I've had Europa 2 years now. I do a lot of different stuff. It's really stimulating, very difficult work at times. But I feel like I'm beginning to break a pattern that I had been building up in my career without thinking about it. The first is that I would jump in to a new role. I would absolutely sink to the bottom because I did not know enough about either the discipline or the industry or anything approaching the role. And then I'd start swimming, and then just as the difficulty level started to drop, I would leave and start something again. And that was my kind of write-off. But what I have realized is that I may have just been early. It's actually turned out that the time we're in, 2026, it's a great time to be a generalist, and that's because of AI. In the old days, having lots of breadth without this depth used to be a real liability, but it turns out that those of us that are really into jumping might have just been early. And because today, what they used to call the T-shaped individual, someone with wit, they've got the equivalent of an artificial team that has PhDs in the deep domain specializations that you need. Still need deep domain specialists, don't get me wrong, but I'm also saying it is a great time to be a generalist. So that's it. That's my Pecha Kucha talk. I still jump off the deep end. I am still jumping. I've got better at picking my dives. That self-doubt, that terrible wondering if I've got the goods, it has never gone away. But I still do it. I jump. All that I've got better at now is I think I've got better at jumping into waters that I know I can swim out of. And that's my talk. If you have been watching Slideshow all this time and you've never linked up with me on LinkedIn or checked out my newsletter, Bright Objects, now's the time. Here is on the screen a QR code like many of my guests normally do. Jump on there and grab the links, and thanks very much. And that is the end of this edition of Slideshow. Hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time with a guest, probably.